So welcome to this Melbourne Connect event, Advancing Creative Invention. Before we begin, and for those attending today, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're on today, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, as well as the traditional owners of the land you're situated on, and acknowledge that Indigenous Australians have been custodians of the lands and waterways of this land that we call Australia for thousands of years. So we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and thank you all so much for being here. So my name's Garry Williams. I'm the creative producer of innovation at Melbourne Connect, a part of University of Melbourne, and delivering this event for you here today, and stoked to have you all along. So this event series is part of the Melbourne Connect online event series for 2020. For those who haven't joined, we've been running events at around a rate of one every week or two across differing themes and topics. I'll share a little tiny slideshow just for a bit of context. So let me share my screen briefly, and then we'll launch into announcing our speakers for today. What I'll do is just outline what Melbourne Connect is. So you can check it out online at melbourneconnect.com.au. But essentially, Melbourne Connect's a forthcoming innovation precinct, which is launching at the end of 2020 on the corner of Swanston and Grudden Street. It'll be a connected innovation ecosystem. It'll have university researchers, talents, industry partners, inventors, creators, you name it. And located in the precinct will be the Melbourne School of Engineering, the Centre for AI and Digital Ethics, Science Gallery Melbourne, Melbourne Accelerator program, which has added pertinence for today, Fab Lab, Makerspace, and of course, event spaces. So events such as these, which will be running in person, we will run them in person. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that pain for this year, being that a lot of our engagement and activation activities have been suddenly removed from us, but it will come around quickly, and we will gather again. So we're here for Advancing Creative Invention. I'm really pleased to have all our panelists here today. I'm not going to delay it too long, but maybe I'll introduce you just briefly by your sort of title per se, and then you can give a brief spiel about what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis. So we've got Judy Anderson, the CEO of Startup Victoria. Hey, Judes.
Hey, Garry, how are you doing?
Great to have you. We've got Michelle Mannering. She's the co-founder of Raine electric scooters. And we've got, hey mate, and we've got Trent Clews-de Castella, who's the CEO and co-founder of Phoria. Good to see you, Trent.
Hello, everybody.
Also on the call, on the webinar today, just so you know, we've got Zara Zainal. She'll be producing a graphic recording for us of all our speakers for today, which is very, very cool, a great storytelling technique. And we'll publish that out at the conclusion via social media, and also right at the very end of the event, actually spotlight it so we can see what's being put together. You can click on it at any time to pin it to your video if you want to check out the progress, but it's very cool. We're all going to be made into caricatures, and we're pretty excited. I won't delay the admin part. We're going to go up till 1:30 maximum. If you have any questions to ask, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, or the chat function. I'm not really too fussed. We'll curate those questions and put them back to the panelists. But essentially, we're going to have a free-flowing panel discussion per se. We're going to cover a wide range of topics, both focusing on Melbourne Accelerator program, which has added relevance for two of our speakers today. A general overview of trends and emerging technologies, and also the specific projects that each of us have been involved in. Very exciting to have you all here. Thanks for joining. We've got a bunch of people on the webinar today, so really excited. So look, without further delay, I'm going to basically mute myself. Let's start with you, Judy. Let's talk about what you do on a day-to-day basis throughout Victoria's ecosystem.
Sure, happy to. And g'day to everyone who's joining in for the webinar today. I did just also want to start, so every time Startup Victoria runs an event online as well, we do acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. But I think working from home, and like, even though we're all connecting virtually in the same place, we're all physically still dispersed. And I think it can actually be really hard to know who to acknowledge if you're not used to knowing who the traditional owners are. So something I found really helpful is there's this super handy map, which I'll maybe post in the chat, or if you just type in your suburb or like your postcode, it will actually tell you who the traditional owners are for where you're working from. So yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to check that out. So in terms of Startup Vic, we are a not-for-profit organisation set up to support founder success here in Victoria. We're a community of over 25,000 people now, which is absolutely insane. That makes us one of the largest entrepreneurship groups in the country, and indeed like the Southern Hemisphere. Our job is to help founders to grow and succeed, and we do that in a couple of different ways. So we run a few programs of our own directly with founders, whether that's our pitch night events, our Founder Connect networking events, our later stage Scale Up Founder Program Growth Club. But the role we're most known for is kind of being the aggregator of all startup related news, events, jobs and stories from across the ecosystem, which we distribute through our weekly newsletter, our social media and our website. So in terms of my role, I guess it's to figure out what we should be doing next, what we should be doing to support founders. So a big part of my role is actually getting out of the building, metaphorically, and working with our founders to figure out what are the current problems that they're having in growing their startup, whether that's connecting with an investor, finding employees, accessing, growth experts, like whatever it is that they need help with, and then connecting them with that resource. So that's a little bit about what I do. I'm sure I'm forgetting lots, but that's the stuff just on the surface, I guess.
No, it's all right. We'll have plenty of questions which will correlate into the large-scale community engagement activities that you do. But yeah, really keen to also get a sense of, I guess, the inherent, trends that you've noticed over time. We're here for advancing creative invention. So fundamentally, we might be referencing, I guess, some new and emerging projects, products, and ideas that have emanated from really remarkable streams and wavelengths. And I'm really keen to get your perspective as we go. But let's go from yourself, Judy, into yourself, Michelle. I'm going alphabetical order, which is always the easiest these days. Michelle, how are you going? Thanks for joining us. And what's filling up your day-to-day? Let me rephrase that. How are you prioritizing your day-to-day?
I'm glad you say that, because most people that I'm talking to at the moment are just like, oh, I've got so much free time on my hands and this. I was like, can I have some of your free time? I'm like working more now than I did pre-COVID. So it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, my day-to-day is it's very varied. It's very different. I very much enjoy my day-to-day. But in terms of like the kind of things I'm doing with the Melbourne ecosystem, I really love how connected the ecosystem is. And funnily enough, like Garry and I know each other for a long time. And I used to work at Melbourne Connect back when it was called Carlton Connect. So we've got to come full circle now, which is exciting. But I think probably one of my biggest parts of the Melbourne ecosystem at the moment is very much the MAP community. It's a Melbourne Accelerator program. Both Trent and I went through the MAP program. It sits within Melbourne Connect more broadly. I'm an entrepreneur in residence this year, so we've got our new cohort coming through. It's very, very exciting. We're doing a lot of work with Raine scooters and connecting not just Melbourne's ecosystem, but the ecosystem more broadly. They also call me the Hackathon Queen because I run like a lot of hackathons, and I started doing them back at Melbourne Connect, and like the last one I did was like just over the weekend. Working with a lot of the guys and girls from Melbourne and Sydney to showcase Australian innovation and put it on the global map and the global ecosystem. So we were doing a hackathon called Call for Code. It's a big global hackathon, and we ran the ANZ chapters. So we were, putting some things in place and helping some of the hackathon participants from Australia and New Zealand to help them curate and better their ideas so that when they submit them for the global, that Australia looks amazing, because that's one of the things we love doing as founders, being from Melbourne. One of the things, especially with Raine scooters, is we're selling globally. It's a global company. We've got sales all over the world. Like even last week, we had sales from Israel, Peru, America, yes, Australia. And one of the things people say is, oh, why don't you just not worry about Australia because it's such a small market. I was like, no, we live here and Australia is the best and Melbourne is amazing. So we really, really love to promote anything and everything Melbourne, connect people, chat to people, talk to people, and just showcase the really cool things that are coming out of Melbourne, because there is so much cool stuff coming out of Melbourne, and it's really exciting to be a part of.
Well, and tell us about Raine scooters. So that's an electric scooter. Is it in the market at the moment?
Yeah, so it's in the background of my cool background here. You can see it. We've actually got a competition running which closes in about 4 days where you can win your own scooter. So head on over to our website if you want to win 2 electric scooters for yourself. But it's an electric scooter. It's got a really nice range and speed on it. And the idea is that people can use it for fun, but commuting, getting around the city. Interestingly enough, last week I just spoke on a panel with some of the people from the city of Melbourne, and Lime Scooters were talking about, what does Melbourne look like, especially its transport? What does Melbourne's transport and ecosystem look like in a post-COVID environment? And scooters and micro-mobility or personal rideables are looking very, very good for the future of Melbourne post-COVID. So if you're in the market for an electric scooter, or you want to get rid of your car, which is what I did, and get something a little bit more portable, scooters are a great way to go.
Cool, and we will reference, I guess, some aspects of COVID-19, I guess some flow-on effects, whether positive or negative, during the course of the discussion. But yeah, looking forward to hearing more about Raine. I've got some particular questions about, in particular, the marketing campaign, which was certainly of note, and I guess some industry conversations about regulations, etc. So we'll dive into that soon, but also, I guess, the corresponding way in terms of the various initiatives and projects that you've been involved with, which have culminated in this with your pretty awesome team. So look, we'll get to that shortly, but I won't leave our third guest hanging for too much longer. Trent, thanks a lot for joining us. Trent Clews-de Castella, how you doing?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, really good. And I appreciate getting my name right. Often people have a little tongue twister every time they're trying to pronounce it. But
oh, really?
Yeah, really well.
I talk nonsense for a living, so maybe that's why I'm so skilled at it. But look, hey, how's it going? I know you've had some great achievements and industry recognition of late, but I won't do the service of talking about it. Why don't you tell us what Phoria is, what you've been involved in lately, and also some of these I guess really fantastic recognitions that have been thrown away in very recent times.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. This is a great panel, firstly. When I first moved to Melbourne, one of the first events I started going to was the Up Vic events, mainly that time probably for the free pizza and beer, but it definitely percolated around a few ideas at that point in time. And yeah, Michelle and I and the whole Phoria team and the Raine team go way back, and I can definitely testify to the magic and joy that comes from riding a scooter around. I think the world just feels closer, everything kind of feels at your doorstep in a way, which is good. So I guess for Phoria, we effectively are an extended reality company, or an XR company. And so XR is really this emerging spectrum of immersive tech that we see coming into the fold. Obviously, VR's been around for a long time now, and it's really starting to mature. Facebook and Oculus have recorded a really strong 80% growth in terms of VR revenue in the last few months. But then on the other side, you have things like augmented reality, which is, started, I guess, in the public sphere in terms of Pokemon Go, but now it's really extending to become a practical tool that can actually change the way that we see and engage with and understand the world around us. And then I think that kind of, moonshot horizon that is coming pretty quickly in the next few years is mixed reality, right? So using smart glasses to then actually break free from these little screens and these kind of boxes that we're all conforming into, and bringing the digital world and the internet to life around us. And that's really what we're most excited by in the future there. But yeah, funnily, we started as a 3D company in MAP back in 2014, looking at 3D scanning in different ways that we could perceive space. And then it was, I guess, a thread that we've continued to unravel. And along the way, we started to find now more recently that the data in terms of how we can use it is quite interesting. We can help people look back in time. We're about to do some really exciting stuff with Open House Melbourne really shortly. Project into the future, like Melbourne Connect's a perfect example. How do we know what's coming? How do we better understand, the decisions and the designs that are coming in the future? And I think, immersive technology puts us in a really good position there. But yeah, in regards to your questions, Garry, I think the last two notable mentions for our team here in Melbourne, we've launched two really good projects that kind of come under this umbrella for us, which is XR for Good. So we realized from the early days, the power of these new mediums to transport people into these different places and maybe understand challenging concepts, things like climate change. And so about this time last year, we launched a project with Netflix, the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, and Google. It's called Rewild Our Planet. It was all around social AR and how we can actually have a collaborative experience to better understand the impact that we're having on the planet, but more importantly, the actions that we can embrace to then better regenerate or rewild it. So that won 2 Webbies. The whole team was really chuffed and humbled. We're up against the likes of Facebook and Google in different categories there. So that was great. And then I think 2 weeks ago, we launched a really exciting VR nature series with Oculus and WWF, and that's called Ecosphere. So for anyone out there, those early adopters that have a Oculus Go or an Oculus Quest, that's just on the store. It's a 3-part VR 180 nature series. The team pushed the limits in terms of reality capture, and we're really trying to hone in on as close to like human vision in VR and have some positive stories in there. It's been great in terms of seeing it received and seeing, YouTube vloggers in Germany and Spain leaving reviews on this. So it's been wonderful and really exciting to see where we're going to go in the next few years.
That's amazing. Let's talk about quickly, you mentioned Webbies in passing. So that's a globally recognised, is it multimedia awards? How's that work, and what were you recognised for as part of that process?
Cool. Definitely. Yeah, appreciate it. So the Webbies is categorised as the best of the internet, like the Oscars of digital media in a way, maybe not as glamorous, not as much glitz, but effectively, the Webbies has a whole bunch of categories, and where we fit in was under the category of the best use of AR. And there was some amazing stuff. You had Louis Vuitton doing some things, the Tate Modern looking at like the future museum experiences, and a whole bunch of other different things were submitted. But I think really what stood out there was we're using really like storytelling and AR as a way to actually bring people together, more than just novelty, we believe, in terms of the types of experiences and how we can engage people towards more how we might think about behavioral change or some of the solutions that we already know exist, but how do we actually act on them is something we're keen to explore if XR can actually elicit some follow-up next step.
That's amazing. Look, we're going to dive into the projects soon, including everything from these ones through to collaborations that you've done with artists such as Raine and Science Gallery Melbourne and more. What I might do, Judy, I might throw to you, maybe you can give a little bit of a background of your background, so your pathway into, I guess, running Startup Victoria, what that means from an engagement perspective, and then some things that you've noticed from a trends perspective, particularly within Victoria or Melbourne in this context, which can then also, I guess, inform us a little bit about, the groundswell of emerging creative technology and some of those overlaps and etc. And then we'll move over to Michelle and Trent and then have a bit more of a discussion about who's the team involved in the projects, how they come to fruition and how some of these partnerships work. So I've prepared you in advance rather than just springing it on you. But Judy, tell us a bit about your background and how you got into this type of role.
Yeah, sure. It's I'll do the short version just to spare everyone. So I've been at Startup Vic now for 2 years as of last week, which I can't believe it's been 2 years. In some ways it feels like I've been in the startup community forever, and in some ways, like, the startup community is so massive, there's still so many people that I haven't met, so I feel like I've been here for 5 minutes. But before stepping into the role as CEO of Startup Vic, I spent about 4.5 years working at a science-based innovation consultancy up in Sydney. So I used to be the head of our Sydney office up there for a company called Invention. Not sure if many people have heard of Invention. It runs the AFR Most Innovative Companies list, which we co-created a few years back with them. And my job there was basically to teach the top end of town, so ASX 250 and other global large corporations, how to innovate from within. So basically working for the enemy. So trying to help organizations to create their own startups or think like a startup. So a lot of what we used there was based in organizational psychology, management science, and neuroscience. So I learned a lot there about how people think. So how do you actually find the right problems to solve? How do you then actually think of creative solutions? How do you actually execute them in a very rigorous, controlled environment? So I learned a lot there in my time. Prior to that, I was working as the innovation manager for Deloitte Australia. So again, working in a really large established organisation where it was our job to find new products and services in the financial services sector. So tax innovation isn't necessarily the sexiest thing in the world, but it turns out there are actually really creative ways you can conduct an audit. And you can actually make that experience something pretty enjoyable as opposed to pretty vanilla. So, and prior to that, I was studying entrepreneurship. So actually at RMIT. So that was when I think it was the second entrepreneurship course at the time you could study in Australia after Swinburne. And there, I didn't actually learn what you would learn now. So if you were to go to RMIT or to Melbourne or the Wade Institute or any sort of other like Y Combinator startup school, the things you would learn now about how to create a business are actually incredibly helpful. It's things like lean startup methodology, business model canvases, like how to recruit customers, like things that are really practical and scrappy and lean that actually get you out of the building and having an MVP and testing your value prop really, really quickly. But when I studied entrepreneurship, it was how to write a business plan, commercial law for entrepreneurs, finance 101, guerrilla marketing. But the thing that I found really helpful in my entrepreneurship studies was actually the cohort of people. So like a lot of the people that I studied with had the same kind of mindset. They wanted to build new products and services that would change the world in some way. So the people that I met when I studied when I was younger, they're people like Ned Dwyer, who went on to build a successful scale-up, now works in Silicon Valley, exited to GoDaddy, like people like that who viewed the world in a particular way. I guess if you fast forward, I then got a little lost, obviously, in the corporate world, trying to get rid of my imposter syndrome and figure out how business was actually done. And then after the better part of a decade, I had a bit of a come to Jesus moment. I was hosting a Silicon Valley tour with some of our Asia Pac exec clients, showing them how innovative companies like Google and Twitter and Box were actually incorporating innovation into what they did. And I realized that I'd spent the better part of a decade helping other people innovate. And some things worked and some things didn't. And I found where I got the most amount of energy was whenever I got to work directly with an entrepreneur, because they were the ones who, regardless of whatever structure, constraint, or like blocker was in their way, they were just going to bash through it. Like they almost had this maniacal obsession with changing the world. And that was really like invigorating. I think like Michelle and Trent, like two exact examples of that, right? Like Raine, scooters, lots of regulatory concerns. I think anytime like I saw Mish pitch, someone would always ask, but like, what about the laws? And like, Mish just always had the best answer. You know what I mean? She didn't care. It wasn't going to stop her from executing Raine, And same with Trent. It's like, oh, but like people don't, like, do people do this? Like the technology is not really there. And Trent's like, it's coming. Like we're just going to be there for when it's ready. We know we're ahead of the curve. Like these are two examples of the type of people that I love to work with. So jump ship, moved back to Melbourne and thought Up Vic is a place where I could probably add a lot of value, bring a lot of that structure and rigor that I've learned from the corporate world into the startup community. And something that I've personally always really enjoyed is connecting people. And I think that that's something that it's not officially part of my job description, but it's something that I do a lot of in the startup community is just connecting the dots because I get to meet a lot of people and hopefully that forms a new connection. So that's a little bit about my background. There's a few other bits and bobs in there, but that's the highlight.
No, that's amazing. I mean, what have you also noticed? I'm really keen, before we hear from Trent and Michelle about, I guess, creating these projects or products, what you've sort of noticed within the industry in terms of emerging or nascent technologies and also some really exciting things that have landed on your desk, so to speak, over the last, in particular, 6 months or so. So things that you see emerging or happening out of not much. We'll talk about challenges a little later as well, but I want to focus on the excitement aspects for now, and also maybe some of the common questions that will get thrown your way as part of that.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So as I was talking, I was also trying to do two things at once and think about the trends question. So there's a couple of things that I've definitely been observing, not just in the Victorian entrepreneurial community, but like Australia-wide and also globally in terms of the type of technologies where we're starting to see where new startups are emerging, and not just where new startups are emerging, but where investors are backing their money as well. So for example, like the previous wave would be like marketplace startups, right? So like where you've got like a soft tech platform where you've got market A with market B, and there's some sort of match of like supply and demand. So now what we're seeing, I guess, is that next wave is wherever there is a startup that's looking at having access to a large database of information and using AI and machine learning to actually create value from that. So any startup that is using AI, machine learning, and has access to a large database, kind of like what Trent is like building, I guess, as a byproduct of all of these creative projects through Phoria, they've been the ones that we're now looking at being really exciting. Another one is cybersecurity as well. So it's been pegged as one of the top 5 growing industries by the Australian government. And I think the last 3 months, COVID has kind of just basically amplified these 2 trends. So AI, machine learning, and cyber, like everyone's kind of doubling down on those. In terms of the type of like verticals we're seeing, impact startups is a massive, massive trend. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't want to work in something that aligns with what they feel like is their purpose. But we're seeing people vote with their feet on creating new startups in that category and also working in startups in that. So, and not just being for purpose, so not just being a not-for-profit or being a charity, but actually being for profit and for purpose. So you can do good for the world and also make money to amplify and grow that impact at the same time. And another one is health. So health tech is massive. So a few big industries that were the highest density for startups in Victoria. So we had health and med tech, sports tech, agriculture tech, and I'm forgetting one, education tech. Education tech has obviously boomed with everyone having to go virtual at the moment. Same for health and med tech, especially with a new shift to advanced manufacturing and everyone's just sort of trying to buy local, make local, help to restart our economy. Sports tech, still up for grabs. We're not quite sure like what the future will hold for sports tech, because a lot of what we had here in Melbourne was based on analytics and sort of observation of physical events. And another one, another trend I just want to mention is the type of founder. So I think previously, like Melbourne's startup community, it's still relatively immature compared to other global ecosystems. Like we don't yet rank in like the top 10 ecosystems around the world. Although we were pegged last year by Startup Genome as the 5th fastest growing in our category. So we're growing fast, but we're still very early days. And historically, like when Startup Vic was first founded, the type of entrepreneurs you'd see are like Mish and like Trent, like true entrepreneurs, like hackers, tinkerers, builders, like the people that like very easily opt out of a dominant ideology in pursuit of something that they're really passionate about. But now what we're seeing is like building a startup is a lot more cool these days. Like it's a lot better understood. The value of like starting your own company, I think, is it's not only easier, but it's definitely a lot more appealing, I think, for the next generation. And we're seeing not just a lot of students opt into entrepreneurship as a real career path for themselves, but also a lot of experienced professionals who do have like 10, 20, 30 years under their belt, and they're now seeing starting a company as a viable option for them. And those pathways are a lot easier as well. So yes, there are a few trends: AI, data, security, impact, health, and more founders and easier pathways to start.
Yeah, cool. Look, I won't sort of leave you off to the side now while we have these discussions. We're going to launch in, have a bit of a discussion about the role of an accelerator program and other things that Trent and Michelle have noticed, and then also dive into their products. But we will be taking questions from the audience as well. We've got a decent amount of people who have attended today, so great to see you all. But if you do have questions, put them in the bottom section, as Jeff Robinson has been doing. Michelle Mannering's been doing all the moderation for me, doing all my hard work, so I've put her to task. But look, Jude, thanks so much for the overview, and we'll loop back very shortly on some more particulars about startup and technology ecosystems. Trent, Michelle, tell us very, very briefly about, I guess, the formative role of an accelerator program. We talked about Melbourne Accelerator Program, and there's a number of others throughout ecosystems throughout Australia and globally. How has that sort of helped yourself, your wider team in developing these products and projects? And what do you recognise most, I guess, in hindsight from that sort of all-in approach for a short period?
Want to go first, Trent, or do you want me to go first?
Go for it, Mish.
All right, so I'm in a very interesting situation where I have been involved in Melbourne Accelerator program before I was a founder. So I mentioned I worked at Melbourne Connect beforehand, so I got to see the Melbourne Accelerator program from a number of different angles. And so it's been really exciting to watch it grow and change over the years. And with that growth and change, you know, the way it's helped founders has slightly differed, and it's gotten like more and more involved. So one of the things like I really like about an accelerator program, especially something like the Melbourne Accelerator program, where it's not a commercial accelerator, i.e. they don't take equity stake in the business like a lot of these other commercial accelerators do. They're really, really involved and really care about actually making founders better. So if you look at the history of the Melbourne Accelerator program, it's a little bit different now because, as Judy said, more and more people are wanting to be entrepreneurs. So the number of people applying to the program every year is just exponentially growing. But like there's been times throughout the program's history where people or projects haven't been chosen on the actual project and what the thing that they're pitching is actually for. Instead, they've chosen that team because of the team. And Trent will know this. I think it was your year that Cadmus went through. Was it your year? No, you were 2014. And Cadmus was 2015. So there's this team that got chosen. They did, like the map team did not like the team's idea at all, but they worked with them and they ended up changing not only their business name, but their entire business structure. And they're now like doing some really crazy, awesome things. And they really chose them because of the type of people they could be. So I think that's one key aspect of accelerator programs, especially when they don't have a commercial stake in the business, is they really, really focus and really passionate about making better people. Because even if your first or second startup might not be successful, your third, fourth, fifth one will be. And that's a really big trend. Is, you know, you'll notice a lot of people who get funded as well. They'll get funded because it's a third or fourth project, and you're usually more successful for third, fourth time around because you've learnt more from the previous things. But for us, the Melbourne Accelerator program has been a really key driver. I actually went through the Accelerator program in 2016, so a couple of years after Trent. But I knew Trent through Melbourne Connect, which was really exciting, really awesome. And I went through in 2016, but not with Raine, with a completely different company. So I had an AI tech startup, which is really cool. It's still going. They're doing some really, really cool stuff with some of the big supermarkets at the moment around like visual recognition and things like that. We can talk more about that later if you need to, but we won't talk too much about that. But I went there in 2016 and I met James from Baja Board. So James had this really cool electric skateboard company, Baja Board, with a couple other guys, and they went through the program the same year. We met each other there, and then now we run Raine together, which is really interesting the way like things grow and change. So Raine's actually like my fourth company or something like that. I kind of losing count now, but I think this is coming back to Judy's point too, and the key role of accelerator programs is all this stuff is about connecting people, about networking, about making better founders, about finding the right kind of people, just about like, connecting into this cool ecosystem of stuff. And, Trent said, with the two teams, like the Raine team, so myself and James go back with Phoria quite a fair way in very different capacities. So when I was still at Black AI, we're going through the Melbourne Accelerator program, we're doing some really cool stuff together. I remember doing some voiceover work for one of your AI apps. It was really cool. I got to try out all the cool things first, which is awesome. And then James, coming from a more engineering type of background, was helping Phoria build some really cool robots and tech and stuff. So it's like, this is what I love, not just about the Melbourne Accelerator program, but Melbourne more in general. It's like everyone was there just helping each other out and, just being awesome. And, it still works even now. Like I still keep in touch with the same people I went through the program with. So Delicious Cattle, that started the bacon seasoning company, literally sent me a care package yesterday of all these new bacon flavors and bacon seasoning. And I looked on his website because I was showing it off on my live streams, and I'm still on the homepage of the website from one of the ads that I helped them with. So this is definitely the thing I love about this ecosystem so much, is the way people connect with one another, help one another, and just help each other grow. Because that's what definitely the coolest thing about Melbourne. So if you're not in Melbourne and you're listening from somewhere else, move to Melbourne. It's good.
Let's talk also about, first of all, and you have another co-founder as part of the Raine Scooters
so there's three of us.
reception team. Who's the other person apart from yourself and James?
Yeah, so Mark Alexander is one of the founders of LifeX, another really cool Melbourne company that has gone global. You'll probably see them. They make smart light bulbs. You'll probably see them in Officeworks, JB Hi-Fi, Bunnings, like all that kind of stuff. I probably have about it's lots of dollars
sort of
worth of stuff in my house.
It's like an IoT million color spectrum.
Yeah, so there's 16.8 million colors. They do like strip lighting, feature lighting, like just general kind of room lighting that you can change. It now all integrates with like Amazon, Alexa, Google Nest, Google Cloud, that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool, like smart integrated lighting system for
very cool.
mainly your house, but anyway.
Let's also talk about, before we move on to Phoria, I really want to ask you this question about, I guess, exposure or outreach for when launching a new product. You had a phenomenal Kickstarter campaign. So tell us a little bit about that. I guess some of the data or statistics involved in that. When launching something out to market, and I guess the build-up campaign to reaching that point where you attract an explosion of customers. You did it very well, obviously. So how did you find that campaign? What are some learnings off the back of it?
Yeah, so a few key things on that. Yeah, it was one of the fastest funded, especially like high-end product on Kickstarter. So we raised the full amount in 43 minutes, which was insane, and we ended up making over $500,000, which is pretty cool. So thanks to anyone here who bought an electric scooter on Kickstarter. But yeah, a few key things on that is you've probably heard the most successful Kickstarter campaign from an Australian company so far is Neural, another company who went through MAP, funnily enough, and also LifeX ran a successful Kickstarter campaign. So Mark had already run successful Kickstarter campaigns on LifeX. He was also the advisor to Neural while they were going through their Kickstarter campaign. So we already had that kind of background knowledge. Baja Board went on Kickstarter. I had a little bit of experience on it beforehand as well. So we had that kind of experience in the team. Again, going back to the connecting with people, I've known Trent and the Phoria team for so long that one of the guys who was working with Phoria for a while started his own marketing company. And so him and his team is our marketing team. So Trent's like, this is cool. So if they're out listening, hi, shout out to Romla. They've done an amazing job on our marketing. But the key things around that Kickstarter campaign is we started early. Like I get people coming to me now being like, I need help like marketing my Kickstarter campaign and make it successful. And I'm like, oh, when are you planning to go live? And they're like, oh, we're already live. And I was like, cool, too late. Like, I mean, I can help you, but it's going to be a little bit late, right? I mean, the big thing is you need to build up these things beforehand. So we started building up our marketing campaign, our Kickstarter campaign, about 6 months in advance. And the reason we were so successful in terms of like, having the whole campaign fully funded in 43 minutes is because we built up this community, this audience, this group of people that were literally sitting there with their credit cards in hand, waiting for our Kickstarter campaign to go live so they could click the button and buy it. And again, that comes back down to our various platforms we use. We obviously use Facebook marketing. We did a lot of blog posts. We had a lot of content already going out. So there's all this like legitimacy around a product, because one of the things with Kickstarter, a lot of people can have questions around the legitimacy of a product. So that was already out there. And then, just getting people really, really excited. So, what do you do when you look for a product online? Do you buy it from the first place you see it, or do you look to see what other people have said about it? Do you look for reviews? Do you look for information? Do you look for, all those kind of things? So all that was already in there. We had so many companies like that were not just reviewing the product, but like putting out articles on it. So it looked legit. Again, having 3 founders that have done stuff before is really handy because, again, Kickstarter, people look at the actual team behind it. So if you Google either one of our 3 names, a bazillion articles come up on us. So start early, plan, and then you can execute really well.
I love that. It's really cool building advocacy by a thoughtful content plan, which is very cool, and obviously that pays dividends upon launch, which is very cool. Look, well, thank you so much for outlining it. I've put some links in the slide relating to Raine scooters, etc. As Mish mentioned, there's a competition going at the moment, but I will come back to you very shortly as we end the discussion. I told you in the briefing, an hour just disappears like no end. So sorry to all of you as I leave you off to the side while we focus on another question, but it moves so fast that like to sort of make sure we cover everyone. Trent, that means you're up next. I'm going to continue on with the advocacy theme that Michelle was referencing in terms of, I guess, attracting widespread advocacy from not necessarily yourselves doing that work, but from a wider ecosystem talking about the projects that you're involved in, and thus in turn, I guess, leading to the possible attraction of new business or new partnerships. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process of, well, who's involved in the team, and then the process of how Rewild Our Planet began, and then we might end that with, and then what seeds did that plant for Ecosphere to become a reality, like finding yourself as documentarians?
Nice. Yeah, cool. Good question, man. Yeah, it's funny to try and like backtrack and, you know, find that kind of pivotal moment when maybe it all started, you know, the first domino was pushed over in a sense. But before, when we were speaking around like, you know, the value of accelerator programs like MAP, you know, we're really fortunate because one of the first advisors we got through MAP's now on our board of directors, Leslie Barry. And, you know, one of the pivotal moments for us was actually, we were really fortunate our cohort got a chance to go to Silicon Valley, and we had a demo day at Google HQ. And our pitch specifically was actually a pitch directed to Google to try and get some new hardware that they had released to developers only in the US. And after that pitch was done, I got an email saying, hey, we can send you this device if you'd like to tinker with it. And at that time, that piece of hardware was probably where the sort of most mainstream versions of AR on our smartphones today are at. So I think that was a little bit of a crystal ball, and it opened this channel in terms of working with Google. And so I guess a few pieces, we had some early wins in terms of working with the city of Melbourne. We did a AR treasure hunt around the city for Christmas, and that actually got some good recognition from our friends at Google in the US. And we were over there, and they kind of reached out and they were like, hey, we have this brief, you know, it's pretty ambitious. It's probably a 6-month project. It's due in 3 months. Do you want to take a look at it? And yeah, of course, like it's when Google come knocking, you open the door. And so we quickly, you know, unpacked this proposal. And it's interesting from like the topic today around creativity, you know, the ideas that you can brew up in a creative session, especially in our space, like it literally, you know, as limited as our imagination. But then the challenges of reconciling that and then bringing it into reality and making it, you know, user-friendly and intuitive and good is a bit of a chasm to cross. And so we got this brief from Google, and it was with WWF and Netflix, and it was around the series Our Planet with David Attenborough. And the idea was, how do we just extend from the 2D screen and use AR to bring the 3D world to life around us? And some of the features on Google's side, they were like, all right, well, this new direction of AR is all around social. So how do we actually create a shared experience people can come together? And then persistence. So how do we actually leave our mark and have that extend through time? And so I guess for us, when we were ideating, we're like, all right, well, these are the kind of gameplay mechanics and the features that we can plan around. And we did a lot of testing. It's actually been really awesome. You know, coming through MAP, obviously there's a lot of things in terms of the connections and the mentors and, you know, this serendipitous encounters, say with the Raine team. But I think the reality for us more strategically is actually a little bit more of the collaboration in the research realm. So we've been working for a long time now with the Interaction Design Lab, IDL, out of the engineering department, and then a few other little nodes around data and digital twins and some interesting stuff that's really coming to the fold now. And yeah, the Melbourne Connect team as well in terms of communicating the future aspects. And so we quickly kind of ran these iterative weekly user testing sessions, and we were just like tinkering what works, what doesn't. And we really quickly had to kind of move, you know, triple speed. We brought in some folks from the Fab Lab out of the Melbourne School of Design. team at Arup in terms of sound design. And it was just this execution where it was like so many hands make light work, everyone coming together and kind of chipping in to then actually play at this global level. Like, it was definitely the biggest game that we've played as a XR company. And so we launched this, and it was a pretty interesting launch. Like, it was hard to basically design an installation that was taking place in another city, and you can't really test it on site until it's fully installed and operational. So you kind of like, you know, minimal margin for error. But as soon as we got there and we saw this thing, you know, live up and running, and you start seeing the reactions in the users and kids' faces, and you realize you're starting to tap into something pretty special. And so I think once that was done and shipped, it kind of, you know, I think validated our capabilities here, you know, not just a Melbourne company, you know, doing its thing, but we actually executed effectively. And from that point on, it's just made a lot of these conversations a lot easier. You know, you're not having to then sell in all the time. You're like, here's my body of work. Hopefully that can speak for itself. And so once we launched Rewild, we actually had an interesting challenge. It was meant to just launch in Singapore. Netflix being pretty ambitious, a month before launch, we're like, all right, we want to take this to 3 cities at the same time. And so like, all right, we've got to now 3x the scope. And then so we basically like broke apart into this team. We are fortunate we have about 27 different XR technologists on board. Definitely a really fast growing field in terms of, it's actually the highest, fastest growing demanded job in terms of software engineering is XR. So anyone out there, start kind of tinkering away. There's free courses that Unity have put online, so it's never been a better time. But we started then touring around the world for these installations, and when we were in the US, we actually caught up with the head of immersive technology for Facebook and Oculus, Eric Cheng. He's actually an incredible wildlife photographer. And so we were chatting with him, and he was like, you know, Oculus is a platform for gamers. That's all the content up there, but we're trying to diversify and look at what else is out there. And so we were like, all right, well, we just did this stuff with WWF. And we've been doing this research with Melbourne Zoo here in the Interaction Design Lab around this connection with animals. And he's like, that's an interesting idea. What if we could create some sort of wildlife-based experience? And that was, I guess, the seed or the light bulb in a way that we then quickly, you know, spun up this idea of a VR nature series. And we've been producing VR content for a long time. And fortunately, it wasn't a 3-month project. We had about 9 months to ship that, but incredibly lucky that we just finished filming the last episode right before COVID hit. And so good luck trying to produce anything overseas for the next 12 months. So yeah, really fortunate, and it's just kind of naturally evolved. And then even, you know, by today's standards, without a doubt from where we're sitting, there's definitely been a digital awakening of sorts. A light bulb, I think, is switched in many minds. You know, XR isn't this nice to have novelty. It's actually going to be a pretty, you know, critical staple in terms of how we can engage and collaborate. You know, we can have a meeting, but how does things like creativity come in? I think there's still some interesting limitations and barriers that this new medium will help us overcome. And we've had a lot of fun testing that, running VR all hands with our team and seeing where the current landscape is at in terms of these technologies. You know, it's safe to say we've only just grasped Zoom. I don't think VR kind of conferencing is here just yet, but it's coming. Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey, and it's almost like just a thread where you can't even predict where you're going to end up when you start out in that pathway.
I mean, it's interesting you've mentioned fortuitous timing and being able to produce all this content prior to COVID-19, just like fortuitous timing in these, you know, these bump-ins, these serendipitous exchanges with people that set in motion, I guess, ideas or projects in place. So yeah, you've been fortuitous in those regards, but I'd imagine many I guess setbacks like on the flip side to sort of temper that ledger. So look, I think that it's worth noting that from all three of you, these types of conversations or points could warrant obviously a much larger deep dive, but we're adjusting to online content on the fly and attempting to give everyone who's attending a bit of a taster of what's going on across the industry, what's emerging, and what people are working on, so they can get curious and investigate themselves. Let's talk about, in our last sort of 10 minutes briefly, let's talk about some of the limitations of COVID-19 in our specific examples. All three of you and myself would do a lot of outward in-person engagement. Obviously, VR, you're often there, Trent, putting the goggles on the people. Michelle, by the same token, you're showcasing these products, you're getting people to test them and take them for a spin. Judy, you're running the biggest startup and technology-focused engagement events in Victoria with, sort of 300, 400, 500 people attending at a time. So let's hear a very brief point about how it's impacted you positively or negatively, but also from a wider ecosystem perspective on whether you think it's been a help or a hindrance to emerging projects and products and founders.
Cool. I might jump in first. Yeah. So, naturally, a lot of the stuff that we were doing, was dependent upon location-based experiences. So you physically had to be there. We were planning to launch Rewild at Melbourne Museum in May, which has sort of been postponed, maybe 2021, fingers crossed. And on one hand, it's a spanner. I think as a startup, you just constantly are dealing with challenges and pivoting on a dime. I think that's what makes you stronger in a way, builds that resilience. And so what we've since worked towards is really simply just making our stuff publicly accessible, getting it out into the ether in terms of onto the app stores. It's great seeing Ecosphere live. We've got about 35,000 downloads so far, and that's great in terms of the footprint of VR headsets. But then at the same time, we had a really exciting campaign where we were planning to tour Ecosphere and Rewild to all these events like the UNGA as a tool, basically where WWF ambassadors could use it to try and actually transport you into the campaigns that you'd be supporting. And naturally now, the thought, I imagine for a lot of people, putting a VR headset on your face is quite challenging and confronting, and what's the infection, hygiene protocol. And that's actually been something we've really been unpacking. Interestingly, there's a whole bunch of now UV little light boxes that are now disinfecting these, hardware devices. And it's going to be the new norm. Like I got my haircut the other day and there was a light box for all the utensils that the hairdresser was using. And so I think that's definitely one area that we're pivoting and just adapting and thinking about, almost like touchless experiences, or a way that you can actually bring your own device essentially. And I think beyond that, that's obviously some of the challenges, but yeah, there's a lot of really great ideas that are coming out. Like people are just hitting us up. It's just really exciting. I think it's definitely going to be in about maybe 2 years moving so much faster, because all these ideas, I think people will still be going, well, I can build a startup in that space. And, XR isn't really that hard to do once you get started. And so I feel like there's going to be a lot more potential. I saw one of the earlier questions was around, taking a risk and starting a startup maybe in this time where jobs aren't as secure. And that was the exact decision I made when I kind of kicked off my entrepreneurial journey. Was the reality is, it's different for a lot of people, especially being a white male here, but there's never been a better time to take a risk. And even if you were to stumble and fall and fail, here in Australia, there's an amazing support network there that's going to, catch you and help you get back on your feet. So I definitely would implore anyone that's thinking of, brewing up an idea, especially in the XR space, reach out, speak to people. I think, like Judy said earlier, get outside and actually connect, whether it is, other businesses or future, business partners or clients. It definitely just helps to be having these conversations. And yeah, I think in general, lastly, is it does feel like there's more time. Definitely busier and doing more, but less, running around, face-to-face stuff. It's to the point. Everyone's here on the call on time. Let's go. And it doesn't have to be an hour thing. We can get it done in 10 minutes. And I like this cadence. It feels a little bit more fresh and it's more succinct. So yeah, hopefully we don't necessarily go back to the old, but we forge forward with the new.
Yeah, well put, man. Thank you very much. I'll put some links in the side just for everyone to check out some of your various projects. But thank you again. Your avatar's on the way. Thanks,
Yeah.
Trent. And as I mentioned, we'll have in-person events at a later stage where we can test this technology out and you know, potentially use some gesture-based technology as well.
Nice.
Michelle, speaking of saving time,
Yeah,
Raine,
I think like people just need to have a think about like what is the next stage here, like what do we go to next. So I also happen to work for GitHub, and we do events like all over the world. So I was meant to be in 7 different countries in March and April alone, all for different events, different trips as well, and like couldn't do them all. So I think I mentioned at the start of the call that I'm doing more work now than I was previously, and it's because I now have the opportunity to speak at literally every single event if I want to, because I'm not limited by where it is or when it's going to be, because I can't be like, oh, sorry, I'm not available that day because I'm in India, not, you know, Australia. Whereas it's like, and my boss is the same. He was like, oh, it was really funny. The other day, this is my GitHub boss. He's like, oh, you know, I did a talk in Melbourne, Australia, London, then America, and then sat down for breakfast with my kids. And it's like, so random, right? So we actually have more opportunity. And I think that's the thing we need to come back to in all these things when you're doing startups is, yes, there's going to be roadblocks, and yes, COVID is a giant big roadblock, but how do you overcome that? So one of the things that we look at for Raine is, yes, obviously we can't do in-person like demos and things like that, but there's opportunities all around the world for stuff that allows us to be successful. So one of the things that's happening over in Italy is the government are giving everyone a $500 rebate if you buy an electric rideable, because it encourages you to get away from your car. So we're now getting all these sales from Italy because the government's paying for them essentially half the price of our scooter. So they were like, yeah, buy scooters, like, you know, free money, this is great. And then, you know, like Trent, people still want to touch and feel the scooter. So we're starting to like collect people's information for when they're excited, when they're ready, and when, you know, different restrictions and stuff come available, to come and do like ride demos with us and, you know, check out the scooter in person, chat to the team in person. And one of the cool things about that is we can limit it to a small number of people, and having a small number of people can sometimes be a lot better than a huge amount of people. It means you'll get more one-on-one time with, you know, us as founders. You'll get more time to ride the scooter yourself instead of trying to, you know, compete with 200 other people who are going to be there on launch day or for ride day. So I think, you know, for every roadblock that comes up, there's always an opportunity for it. So yeah, on the speaking circle, I'm doing more of it. On Raine, we're getting rebates and things from all over the world. We get to do more video content. So one of the things is we often struggled with previously was to do, to get all 3 of us, where there was a time when we're not all over the place, to do our like Kickstarter video updates. And now we can just do it online. Like we all just dial in and do the recording just like this and send it out to everyone. Everyone's like, oh, this is cool. We get to see all 3 founders all at once. You know, we love it. So just thinking outside the square is such a good way. And the last one I'll bring up before we pass on to Judy is the hackathon I did on the weekend. I was saying to someone, it actually felt like I was in an IRL hackathon. So they're using this new platform called Remo, REMO. It's a new startup. It's amazing. And you go into like a virtual venue, and you don't have to have any extra platforms available. It's like a Zoom thing. So it looks like, you know, it'll pick up your video and your microphone, but you go into the room, and when you land, it's like, which level would you like to go to first, Michelle? And someone messaged me, was like, welcome to the venue, Michelle. Go up to level 9. That's where all the new teams are, people that are doing things. I went up to level 9. And I'm like, cool. And I joined a table, and I was sitting there. As soon as you join the table, my video pops up and everyone can chat on the table. There's like a virtual whiteboard on the table we can all use. And then when I was finished talking with that team, I went down to level 1, and I was back on the bottom level where I could see all the different teams working away. And as a mentor, I like jumped onto each table and sat in for 5-10 minutes on each one, checked in how they go. And then when I was done, I went to my own little table. And then people came and joined me, like, Mish, like, this is cool. Like, you know, I haven't seen you for ages. And we have our own little chat, and you can message us. So there are so many ways you can replicate some of the things that are happening that usually happen IRL and do it. Like, so that was definitely one of my big highlights.
Love that. Yeah. And it's just, you know, it's that concept of invention versus innovation, isn't it? It's just, you know, innovate to go over to Zoom, but then people are creating like actual venues virtually. Yeah. It's incredible. Look, thank you so much. And as I mentioned with Trent, we will showcase what you do in person. We'll have plenty of in-person events when we don't know, but it'll come around. Look, thanks again, Michelle. And lastly, Judy, sorry to hold you up, but parting remarks, how are you handling, I guess, regards to not having those large-scale in-person engagement events, in which you became accustomed to running multiple times a month? How are you adjusting? What do you foresee in the near future?
Yeah, and I'll try and speak in sound bites for any participants that have got to run to another Zoom, if you're living like death by Zoom life in a day. But also, like Mish, I've just had a bit of a brainwave. We haven't announced it yet, but later in the year, Startup Victoria is partnering with Techstars to run a massive hackathon for the Victorian startup community. We'll have to chat. I don't think we'll be able to host it without the Hackathon Queen, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. But I think, yeah, again, like, just echoing Trent and Mish, we've seen some real upswings as a result of the terrible like global pandemic and the negative impacts it has on people's lives. And we've seen like the negative economic impacts and real personal impacts for founders and startups here in Victoria. For us at Startup Vic, our initial reaction was like kind of like, oh shit, we're an events company and we can't do events. So just like the startups in the community, we were really quickly pivoting to a virtual model. Funnily enough, it actually wasn't that hard. I think the panic was probably not that necessary, but it was actually quite easy to pivot everything online. And it's had a bunch of really cool side effects. So, for example, like we had a first virtual pitch night, and we were really nervous about how it was going to run, but we had more regional founders participating. Because otherwise, like to come into the city, it's a really big time commitment for a lot of people and a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs to make just for free beer and pizza, and to watch 4 startups pitch on stage. So being able to reach a wider audience. And even this month, we found when we put the call out for applications, we're hosting Education Tech Pitch Night next Tuesday. We had people from New Zealand and the States apply to pitch. And now we have this new problem of like, do we let people know from Victoria pitch? So it's like, it's been really interesting. It's created all these new kind of opportunities, like Founder Connect, our structured networking event that we used to run in person at the Commons QV in the city where we were based out of. We now run that online with Zoom breakout rooms. So now we're basically kind of doing like facilitated chat roulette to meet people from within the Startup Vic community. And the feedback from that has been, it's actually really great because for introverts, it's really hard to do that in an open forum, but when you're just in a Zoom meeting, it's really easy to have a meaningful conversation with someone. So like lots of cool side effects happening from taking our programs online. The big limits are obviously like co-working spaces are struggling. So like anything, like there's such a core pillar of our ecosystem, like you cannot underestimate the importance of serendipity. And we've spoken so much about connection and just being in a close proximity. Co-working spaces are awesome for that, whether it's events, working, you're going there for a meeting, the chat you have in the kitchen or in the hallway or in the reception area, like those things actually matter and they spark creativity and connection. So trying to create that online takes a lot more work and it takes a lot more effort and you actually have to think about it. So the sooner we can support our co-working spaces or try and come up with new creative ways to have that serendipity online, the better. Don't know what the solution is, but I know it's something we're missing at the moment. Another big drawback is obviously the health and well-being of the people within the community. Like working from home and being isolated is hard. Like there are really good things about it. There are drawbacks, but making sure that we're keeping, tabs on each other and asking if everyone's going okay. Like being an entrepreneur and trying to do something new. If you haven't yet started inventing something or thinking about a startup, it's a really hard road. It's challenging, it's difficult, it's the hardest thing you will ever do. And it's also going to be hard for a really long time, as I'm sure Mish and Trent can attest to, and making sure we're taking care of each other is a really big part of that. So yeah, just would encourage people when you catch up with people just to see how they're doing. And if you need be, direct them to support services. There's a page on the Startup Vic website, which I'll post, which lists a bunch of free resources for mental health and wellbeing. So please check that out. But I'll finish on a high. The biggest benefit of being forced to work from home, the irony is that we're in our own homes and in our own heads all the time, but now we're seeing it force people to think globally more often. So it's something strange about it. Like people will go out and be in Melbourne in the city and just think Australia first or local market first. And now we're seeing people think, where's the biggest opportunity first? And often that's outside of Australia, whether it's your market or if you're an event organizer like Startup Vic. We would just default to people that we knew in our network. And now the speakers that we're getting are from, like, you know, we're working with Brad Fell, you know, who's in Boulder, Colorado, you know, for an event in a couple of weeks' time, you know. So it's really taken off, I guess, our local blinkers for the best.
Yeah, look, that's a perfect point to end on. You know, our next advancing event is running in 2 weeks. It's called Advancing Economy with Tech. It's a financial technology focus, but one of our speakers, David Rosenko, is he's the global head of e-commerce for Square. He was a former founder of Weebly. He's joining us from San Francisco. You know, distance is no barrier, and it's very cool. We've also got Neil Guo, who's the head of growth for AirwallX, and sorry, I'm getting sidetracked by the graphic recording because it's incredible. But look, I want to thank you all so much once again. As everyone can see, this is a graphic recording from the event. We'll publish this out afterwards via social media, so you can go through it, and we also do a live, I guess, notation of it. But I want to thank everyone for hanging on. We went over time a little bit. It happens. But for those who did, we will be publishing this on YouTube afterwards. So give it a couple of days and it should be published on there. To all our panelists for today, thank you all so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate your time and all the, you know, all the background work you've done, both in terms of the wider ecosystem, Melbourne Connects, and your own ventures and projects. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for organising, Garry, and thank you for your leadership in the community. It's awesome to have you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone.
What about me? I'll see you all very soon. Thank you once again and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.